Hey everyone, and welcome to another Sasquatch Theory podcast. On this episode, we have Adrien, and he had a terrifying Bigfoot encounter in the Kaibab National Forest in Arizona. Adrien was camping with his family, and later on that night, he noticed these glowing eyes in the forest, and then that's when he saw the creature standing there. Later on after the encounter, he could hear the creatures vocalizing, and I feel like they were communicating with one another, and there was a Bigfoot clan in the area. I have received Bigfoot reports from all over the world, and I have noticed that the same areas keep popping up over and over, which tells me that these creatures do live in certain areas. Maybe they do migrate, but they prefer to be in certain locations. But then again, if you go to these spots, that doesn't mean you're going to see Bigfoot, because a lot of the areas where Sasquatch are reported to be seen, they're just extremely huge. I mean, even here in Missouri, you could spend an entire lifetime looking through the Ozarks and never really put a dent in it. But yeah, if you guys can, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and if you have a Bigfoot encounter that you would like to share with me, please contact me sometime. Alright, with all that being said, let's dive straight into Adrien's Bigfoot encounter from the state of Arizona. Adrien, welcome to Sasquatch Theory. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good.
Good to hear. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. Adrien, if you would, tell me a little bit about yourself and your Bigfoot encounter from the very beginning.
Sure. So I was born in the Pacific Northwest in Washington, just south of Seattle. Wasn't huge outdoorsy, but living up there, everything's outdoorsy. We're surrounded by trees no matter what. And few camping trips, hiking trips, things like that. I guess something notable when you're living there, you're surrounded by Bigfoot culture. And when you're a kid and it's all you've ever known, you don't notice it. You know, it's totem poles and carvings of Bigfoot. And, you know, we'd go up into the forest and nobody would talk about it. Nobody told me it was a real thing. Maybe they were trying not to scare me as a kid. But we'd go up there and we'd camp and we'd just have a really good time, really fond memories as a kid doing that in that part of the world. Then Mount St. Helens blew up around 1980. And it just covered everything in ash. And that sort of stopped the trips to the forest for a long time. And shortly after that, we moved to the southwest, to Arizona. Forests are gone. Now it's all brown dirt. It went from black, moist dirt to gray dust to brown clay. I don't know, as a kid, you remember those kind of details, I guess. Anyway, grew up in the Phoenix area after that and just sort of longed for this, you know, nice green lush forest again, and got through school, finished high school, and got the opportunity to go to college up in the mountains, and I jumped on that. So went to college back in the forest, took full advantage of that. Friends, girlfriends, we were hiking and camping every chance we got, even when it was snowing outside. And then I'd say, you know, I got married, found somebody in college, and we were not quite on the same page on the outdoors stuff. So I was way more adventurous, loved to go out and just pitch a tent and have a good time and, you know, take everything in and hike and drive the quads around or whatever, you know, we were doing. I used to joke that, you know, I use my camera like a hunter would use a rifle, but I'm not a hunter. So anyway, so have a few kids, and we finally sort of find this happy ground where she wanted a hard wall. I presented a camper trailer pop-up and it was game on. Now we were camping with the kids, and we're sort of back in the forest again. We spent a lot of time in Arizona, the Mogollon Rim, White Mountains, around Flagstaff, Arizona, north rim of the Grand Canyon. We even went up into Utah a few times, and just had a great time. And that was early 2000s. And then this happened. So I had a sighting. I guess, is there anything else from the background that you'd be interested in leading up to this?
No, that's sufficient enough for me, and I appreciate you for sharing that with me. What happened
Sure.
the day of the encounter? If you would put me in your shoes and describe everything in full detail from the beginning
Okay.
to the end.
So we were living in the Phoenix area, and we were going to go camp in the North Rim. So we were in the Kaibab forest. And it's a long drive. That's about a good 5.5 hour to 6 hour drive. And I'm pretty sure I got myself food poisoned. Something happened on the drive up there. Because when we get to the forest, we get everything set up. You know, we had the whole family there. There was a couple of different campers, full camping setup. We were just there to enjoy the outdoors. And that night, after we got settled, midnight rolls around. I'm still awake, and I just start feeling sick, and I mean really sick. And I couldn't attribute it to anything other than just being food poisoned, I guess. I have some theory that, you know, people have shared with me that maybe it wasn't that. You know, maybe there was something else to this, but I'll get into that in a little bit. But anyway, we're in this pop-up camper trailer. It's the middle of June, probably, you know, June 10th or 15th, somewhere in there. And I get up, head around to the front of our vehicle. I had a little Trailblazer, and it's pitch black, middle of the night, midnight. I'm about to, you know, get sick. And I reach into the driver's side of the Trailblazer and turn on the headlights. It's this little switch. It's computer based, I guess. The headlights come on. I go and stand in front of the vehicle, kind of between the headlights, and I'm just leaning over and taking care of business. As you know, I don't want to be gross, but that was terrible. About, I don't know, a minute into that, I stop and I look up, and about, I would say 20, 25 feet in front of me, I see these, I guess, you know, silver dollar sized red eyeballs that are down about 2 feet off the ground. And, you know, obviously it's something like that's going to catch your attention. I was thinking bear, you know, what could this possibly be? But these eyeballs were so huge, like bigger than any bear you can imagine. And they were reflecting back the headlights, because it was directly in front of me. And it was kind of like if you shine the flashlight into your dog's eyes or something. I could see these metallic reflecting red eyes. So that red reflection was like the size of a silver dollar, I guess. Anyway, one eye blinks slowly, and you can kind of see, you know, the eyelids close around the eye and then it opens back up. And then the other eye blinks. So it's like one eye blink and then the other eye blink, and it just made me more curious. And I'm leaning into this, trying to see what this thing is, and I really couldn't see anything except the eyes. And then this thing just stood up, and it just kept going up. The next day we looked at the tree where I was, you know, seeing this, and I said, that branch, you know, I was pointing up, was, you know, right at its head level. And that thing was easily 9 feet off the ground. So, part of this, once it stood up, you know, I could see more of it. And again, the headlights are right on it. But even with that, it was like a hole, you know, it was just a black hole. That the creature's hair was black as black could be. No reflection at all, no shimmer. It was just black. And I could see the tree that it was standing partially behind. So like its left shoulder was behind the tree. And its head and right shoulder were, easily visible. And I could see its right leg. So right arm, right shoulder, right leg, and head. But anyway, this was just unbelievably black. I couldn't see any facial features. I could still see the eyeballs. And after this thing stood up, it was just as still as could be. Like a statue, just stood there, like like those statues I saw as a kid. And I can't even tell you what I was feeling. I was just like, what in the heck is that? is the sense that I was having at that moment. And the thing, just the way it was so still was so eerie. It just stood up and just stopped moving. Anyway, I could easily make out the size of its arm. And my kids joke, when I tell them this story, that its arm is as big as my whole body, just the arm. When I think about it, I mean, I didn't think this at the moment, but when I look straight ahead, flat, my eyes were at its elbow. That's how tall this thing is. I imagine, like, if you're standing in a house, a standard 8-foot ceiling, its shoulder would have been pushing through the ceiling. If you can just imagine that, like a creature standing in your room where its shoulder is pushing through the ceiling of the room. It's just that big. It's so amazing. And I could see the trees behind it. So it literally was like a silhouette. And I could see the tree it was standing next to. I could see the ground. I could see little bushes. I could see the trees behind it. And it stands out because, you could see through the underarm, like the arm wasn't touching its side. It was sort of out. And I could see what was behind it through that space. And again, just so weird that it was like a black hole silhouette with the headlights shining right on it like that. So anyway, I'm standing there trying to take this in, trying to process this, feeling the way I was feeling. My stomach was just turning and turning, and my head was pounding. And I wasn't scared at that moment. And then I guess the way the Trailblazers headlights work, they're on a timer. We don't want to let the battery die. So I'm standing there looking at this giant monster creature with red reflective eyes, and those damn headlights just shut off. And I'm in the pitch black. I mean, it's black. I can't see my own hands in front of my face. And that's when I got really, really scared. And so at that moment, all I could think to do is feel my way around the vehicle, get back to the side where the door of the trailer was, and get back in that trailer and just sit down inside the trailer. And I couldn't move. I couldn't talk. I thought about waking everybody up and unhooking the car and just bolting out of the forest. And I couldn't do that. Nobody else saw it. Nobody else knew what was going on. And I was thinking, hey, this is instant divorce. We had another trailer there with other people. And I thought, God, the only thing I can do is just sit here and listen as intently as I could, just in case this thing did anything else. My plan was just wake everybody up and, have a little bit of a hissy fit. And that's what I did. I just went on watch. And before I knew it, it was 2:00 in the morning. That's how petrified I was. I didn't even notice the time passing because it just that scared. The headlights shutting off is what scared me so bad. I really, in the moment of seeing it, I wasn't afraid. It was when those damn headlights shut off. And then 2:00 in the morning rolls around, and I hear a scream off in the forest, is probably 200 or 300 yards away, I'm guessing. And this scream it was like a howling roar, and you could hear like a whistling high pitch to it, a hiss to it, and then also bass, just this unbelievable bass. You could tell this sound was coming out of something huge. And it kind of had sort of an ooh sound to it, like it was a howling ooh vowel sound, almost like if you can imagine an ape throwing its head back and making its little ooh lip shape or something. Part of that roar had that ooh to it, and it did it twice. And this was like 10-second long roars, two of them. And man, I thought I was scared when those headlights went off. When I heard that, it was just even worse. So anyway, I ended up sitting on the floor of that tent trailer until the sun came up, just riveted, like not even noticing time passing, completely freaked, adrenaline rush the whole time. And I heard nothing else. And that's the sighting. That's the gist of everything that happened. The next day, I started to try to bring it up. My wife's dad, and they just looked at me like I was nuts. They didn't hear the scream, and I got the point really quick. Like they don't want to talk about this. I dropped it. I actually said, it must have been an elk or something, But anyway, that's the story. After that was around 2005, or was 2005 in June. And after, falling back in love with the forest, I couldn't go back out there again. I was so petrified. That camper trailer sat in the side of the house and just got old till we finally found somebody to buy it. And that's 15 years of just not wanting anything to do with the outdoors. I just sort of immersed myself in technology and being in the city and just not even thinking about it. I was so scared for so long. And I finally decided to, give it a shot again and started camping again. Now we have a trailer. We're getting back out there. There's been a lot of, stuff that's gone into me, getting the courage back up to be out there in the dark again. But that's been the recovery, story is just time. And, even to this day, I still sit out there and worry when we're out there. But yeah, I don't know what else to really share. If you have any questions.
All right, I appreciate you for sharing that with me, Adrien. So this encounter had a profound effect on you, and you haven't been back to the forest very much since then, or when you do go, you're terrified when you're out there?
That's the thing. Yeah, I'm not terrified anymore. And we have been back out there quite a bit. So actually joined our hunter safety group in our town, and started just getting to know people that spend a lot of time out there. And my thought process was kind of selfish and a little bit bad probably, but I wanted to know if anybody else had seen anything like that. These are people that spend a lot of time out there, and not one. I mean, I'm talking hundreds of people that have gone through that, and I never ran into anybody that talked about it or brought it up. When I would bring up my story, they'd be like, "Oh, wow, that's interesting," and kind of give me that look like, we don't really talk about this kind of stuff. And that helped a lot, though. I mean, just that motivated me to get out there. It motivated me to get into firearms and, safety, and, preparedness, way more appropriate approach to the outdoors. And I'd highly recommend that for anybody, not just somebody like me. But that was the start of it, and of getting back out there for me. And then just doing it, and everything is okay. And then doing it again, and everything is okay. And that's been the process. I don't know what'll happen if I see something like that again. I really don't want to. I don't even want to acknowledge the thing is real. I would like to just let it be a bad dream. I can't imagine people that see something like this wanting to go see it again. It was just so terrifying and horrible experience, at least for me. And I got to tell you, this thing was not threatening. It just stood there. It was the imagination that was so horrifying. And but yeah, so I think I could have done a better job getting over it and dealing with it than I did. But I think I'm, I'd say pretty good now. We've got a pretty good routine going, or as far as getting out there. And I just kind of view it positively again. We spend a lot of time up in Utah, and that forest is a lot like the Pacific Northwest to me. Really brings it back. So I love that part, but man, it's flavored.
Yeah, absolutely. In both the areas that you mentioned, I've received reports from, I'm not sure how to say it, but the Mogollon Rim and the Kaibab National Forest. I've had a few reports from that area and people that have contacted me saying that they found tracks or they've seen the creature there. So the fact that you brought both those areas up really caught my attention. Is that where you saw the creature, was the Kaibab Forest?
Yeah, we were on the north end of the Grand Canyon. There's the Kaibab Forest there. There's kind of like the North Kaibab Forest, which is more desert, like small shrubberies, and then there's the stuff that's right around the North Rim that's really lush, green, tall pine trees. And we were kind of in that area. We were at a place called Mile and a Half Lake, just south of a little, I don't want to call it a town, but it's more like a gas station place called Jacob Lake. But yeah, that's where it was. About 2 or 3 weeks after this happened to me, where I saw this, that whole part of the forest burned down. It was in 2005. It was one of the largest forest fires in the Kaibab ever, really. And I always thought, yeah, they probably burned that down to flush those guys out of there.
Yeah,
it was just a weird coincidence that fire happened, a couple weeks after I was there and saw this.
Yeah, that is a coincidence. So you saw these red eyeballs. Were they self-illuminated or were they lit up from the headlights?
Headlights. When the headlights went out, they went out. It was just like a metallic red. And they kind of, they would shift colors a little bit, almost rainbow-like, but mostly red. It's kind of like red eye. If you take a picture of somebody and get that red reflection.
Yeah, that's terrifying. And then what did the creature do after that? Like he got up and walked off behind a tree?
No, he was perfectly still. I could see that silhouette, black hair stuff. And then the headlights went out. And I didn't hear any footsteps, nothing, except me, trying to breathe and get myself around the side of that vehicle. And then the scream, like 200 yards away, just this most horrifying sounding scream.
Yeah, that's really terrifying. I mean, I wonder what this creature was possibly up to and how long it was there watching you guys.
Yeah, that gets me back to that stomach ache, because I've heard story, you see something like this and you start researching, like, what the heck did I see? You start listening to recordings, what did I hear? And I've listened to hundreds and never heard one exactly like what I heard. Close, but never exactly. But the weird thing is that stomach problem, that feeling sick. And something made me sick in the trailer. It was really bad when I was in front of the car. And when those headlights went off and I was sitting in the trailer, it's gone. I wasn't sick anymore. And I've wondered, like they talk about infrasound and, things like that, where something about these creatures where they can do things that you can't hear, but can cause you to be nauseated. That's something I've always wondered about, because just the way my symptoms went away when he left.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Possibly this creature used infrasound on you. And from what I've heard, it can make you sick. It can give you a headache. It can blur your vision. Did you experience anything like that? Did your vision seem like it was blurred, or was it just you were sick to your stomach?
It was a headache. So I was laying in bed feeling fine, and then just whoosh, dizziness, headache, and just the most excruciating nausea. I had to get up and get outside as fast as possible because I was going to lose it. And that's what brought me out. I mean, if you really think about it, if that's what that was, it got me out in the open, in the middle of the forest, in the middle of the night, in the pitch black, feeling horrible, not realizing what was going on. That's a scary thought to me.
Yeah, but like it stunned its prey.
Exactly. Not just stunned it, like summoned it. So, but it wasn't aggressive. It seemed like I surprised it almost. I mean, when I first saw it, it was down on the ground. Like those eyes were just 2 feet up off the ground. So maybe I turned those headlights on and it was out there and it just dropped. That in my imagination, I imagine that's what it realized. Oh my gosh, I'm in the center of headlights now. But then the irony of that is, it stood up, and I mean, I couldn't tell you what its face looked like. The headlights were right on it. It was just black. So, talk about stealth. If it didn't have those eyeballs looking at me, I wouldn't have known it was there 20 feet away.
Yeah, that's terrifying. I can't imagine what it's like seeing the red eyes, and I kind of picture the Native Americans sitting around a fire and seeing these red eyes, and they saw a lot of things back in the day because they were out there in the woods all the time.
Yeah, and I've heard a lot of stories. I've grown up completely my entire life surrounded by Native American people, several different tribes, and they all have the same stories. What
did you hear? Did they talk about the hairy man?
Yeah. I've heard both sides of the story, where some of them are, telling you that they're a friend of the people, and the other side of the story is, going down the road of skinwalkers and evil spirits and stuff like that, and even to the point of, just being a bad omen. So, but they're always the same stories. It's kind of always along those lines, and never ever questioning the reality of it, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, it sounds just like the people. Yeah, it sounds just like the people of today. A lot of people are like, "Oh, these creatures are good. They're our forest friends. They're our neighbors." And then other people are like, "They're evil. They're the Nephilim. They'll eat you." And it was the same way with the Native Americans. They would say, "Oh, that's just our big brother out in the woods." And then others would say, "They'll put you in your basket and take your children and your women, and they'll eat them, never to be seen again." So it's kind of the same confusion that was going on back then that's happening now in today's world.
Well, if this thing wanted to eat me, it had me. So I think my encounter was the peaceful kind, and honestly, my sense is that I surprised it when those headlights turned on. You know, all the weird imagination stuff about, infrasound and all of that. I mean, yeah, all of those little elements were part of this, but at the end of the story, I sat on my, the floor of my camper trailer perfectly safe. This thing, once it stood up, didn't move, didn't come towards me, no aggression, no growling, no sound, just these big red eyes staring right at me, and they didn't blink again. Once the thing stood up, those eyes didn't blink. When it was down low, they were a little bit of movement. Like I said, one eye blinked, then the other eye blinked, very slowly. It wasn't like a human blink. It was like a slow close on one eye and then a slow, almost like he was trying to get a better look at me, and the headlights were blinding. But it was actually a peaceful encounter, all things considered.
Yeah. Do you think it was attracted to the campsite, or were there like a bunch of deer there in the area, or were there no deer? Like there was no signs of any wildlife. Did you notice anything like that?
There was no wildlife anywhere. The whole trip we were there, we didn't see anything.
Yeah, that's interesting. Did you go in and investigate the area where the creature was standing the next day to see if you can find any tracks, anything unusual, or did you kind
Yeah,
of just stay away from there?
it left no tracks, and unfortunately the ground was just really hard. So, and we looked everywhere. Where could these tracks be? Because how can you be, a 900-pound creature and not leave tracks? But there was none. And the main thing the next day was recreating where I was standing and where it was standing, and really taking in how big it was. That was the thing. The tree that it was standing next to was, it was probably 4 feet wide, and this creature was twice as wide as that. So it was just a real life giant.
Yeah, absolutely. The creature that vocalized, do you think it was the same creature or another one off in the distance?
No way to know. I mean, but what are the odds that there were two? I guess probably pretty good. If they don't travel alone. But yeah, I always imagined it was the same one, that it was just squealing out there. And it was sort of like that howling scream. It sort of started at a lower pitch and rose up to a plateau and just hung there for 10 seconds. And it kind of goes in one ear and out the other when I say a 10-second long roar, but that's a long time for anything to scream like that. And it's one thing to hear that sound and to hear the bass in it and to hear all those, everything else in between, the high hiss all the way down to the whistling all the way down to this bass. If it was a 1-second scream, that would scare you, but when it just keeps going for 10 seconds, oh my gosh. Yeah, it really got me. And like I said, I have searched and searched and searched, and I've never heard anything that just unloaded a sound like that for that long, with that much dynamic, element to it. And I'd love to run into a recording like that. If you know of anybody who has one of those, I'd love it if you'd share it with me, just so I could be like, yep, I'm not crazy. I didn't make this up, because that's something that goes through my mind all the time. It's just so out there, and especially when you think about it for years. Was that really what it sounded like? Did it really last for 10 seconds? You start questioning yourself. And yeah, I just have to kind of own what I remember of it.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what you heard that night, but I would recommend listening to the St. Louis County, Minnesota Bigfoot Vocalizations, and there's a YouTube channel, and he's got a bunch of different recordings, so you might be able to find kind of what sounded like the creature that you heard that night. But I can only imagine what it was like waking up that next day and telling your wife or your girlfriend and her dad, and them kind of just brushing you off. I'm sure you felt alone, and knowing that you saw that creature probably terrified you for a long time, and it'll definitely
Yeah.
get the gears rolling in your brain, and it's something that you can't stop thinking about.
Well, I did tell my wife the whole story, but when we were sitting there making breakfast that next morning, all I said to everybody else is, did you hear that animal screaming in the forest at 2 o'clock in the morning? And they're like, no, we didn't hear anything. And then my father-in-law looks at me like, don't be an idiot. That was sort of the look I got from it. So I dropped it right away. I was like, oh, it must have been an elk. And I look at my wife. She's looking at me like, shut up. Don't talk about this. And that's been sort of the reaction I get from almost everybody for 20 years is you just don't talk about this. You sound like a nut if you tell somebody that this happened. And that I think is horrible because it makes it harder for me to even deal with the fact that, that happened and it was so scary.
Oh yeah, for sure. When you see something like this, you just want to tell everyone because it's something new. You want to talk about it, kind of get it off your chest, and kind of seek validation from other people who have seen these things as well. But you open up to like hunters, and they're just like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, and try, participating in years of hunter safety programs. I did that for several years, and never once did I get a good story from that. Can you imagine? I saw hundreds of people and never once got a good story.
Yeah. No, I
So
understand
it's
for
nice.
sure. Whenever
It's
you
nice nowadays to be able to hear, especially, channels like yours where people are opening up and talking. And I've got this radar, where I hear somebody telling a story and it's like, nah, I don't know about that one. And then I was listening to your channel and there was somebody telling a story and I was like, ding, ding, yes, this is a real one. And I think maybe my experience was my own and all of these stories are real, who knows? But it was so validating. It was really the first time I had ever heard somebody tell a story that resonated like that with me, that it's like, oh my gosh, finally something real. So I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, and I'm glad you found the channel. When you were living in Washington and Mount St. Helens blew up, did you ever hear any reports or anyone talk about Sasquatch creatures being recovered by the government when the mountain blew up?
Never. Yeah, I mean, I was 10, 12 years old, and it really, like I said, I don't know if it was part of the culture and they were just trying to keep me from, getting scared or something, but I never once was told that these things are real or that, that anything ever was reported about them. They were artwork, it was like part of the environment for me. And it was almost just legend, not reality.
Yeah, that's how it is in Alaska. They got totem poles everywhere of these primate looking creatures, and I mean, most people have never seen one and they don't think twice about it. Is it the same way in Washington? They got like totem poles of like these
Oh yeah.
cryptid creatures.
Yeah, it's eagles and whales and Bigfoots and some other stuff. But yeah, they're everywhere. And like I said, it's part of the environment. And when you grow up there, you don't think that anywhere else is any different. And that's how it was for me. Up until the point, I mean, I never even was even interested in looking into this stuff. So 2005 rolls around and I see this thing looking at me, and that's when I got interested. That's when I did my first Google search and said, what could make that sound? And holy mackerel, what is this 9-foot tall, you know, thing that has an arm that's as big as me?
Yeah. And what's your conclusion as to what these creatures are?
Well, I have lots of thoughts on this, and I'm going to share one. It's a total weird thought, so try not to let me sound too crazy with this. But it's almost like they were here first. That's the sense I get. And for whatever that's worth, you know, that's kind of how I feel about them.
Yeah, that makes sense. These things could have been around before human beings, or maybe there's some type of offspring from humans and primates, but I don't really know either. I've seen them before, and I mean, even when you see these things, it's like you don't know.
Yeah. Well, they're perfectly adapted, and that has a lot of implications to it. And that's been sort of the gist of my conclusion is, that on some level, we are invading on their territory, not the other way around. So, you really take that to the conclusions that it gives, and it's a wild ride.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's in this area where you were camping at? Are there springs, caves, elk, mule deer? What's all up there?
So as far as wildlife,
Yeah,
there's
wildlife
black
in the terrain.
bears, turkey, there's deer and elk, black bear. I probably said that twice. Let's see. There's not a lot of water. It's a pretty dry forest. And that's why I like going up into Utah, because, that forest is a lot more, more vibrant in terms of water resources.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's some springs. And I imagine, if you wanted to try to find one of these things, which I can't imagine anybody wanting to find one, but there's a lot of people that seem to want to, finding a dry forest and then finding the water sources in that dry forest is how to go. That's how you're going to run into one of these things.
Yeah, I would agree. Around here, there's waterways and lakes everywhere, but the area you're talking about, it sounds like if you can find the springs, the fresh water, you can possibly find these creatures. And I'm sure the elk will be around there. And I don't know what kind of trees grow there, but like juniper trees, things like that. And
yeah, it's tall ponderosa pine, and I don't know the names of all the pine trees, but there's about 3 different species of large pine tree there. It's a pretty thick forest.
Yeah, so there's plenty of food there.
Oh, for sure, yeah. And on top of like the actual wildlife, there's also cattle up there, and other livestock that they graze up in that area too. So there's lots of food for one of these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you ever seen a UFO or had a paranormal experience?
Never. Yeah. Never seen anything like that. Just this is the one weird thing in my life, is my wife deciding to marry me and Bigfoot. This little Bigfoot sighting.
Yeah.
When you told me, yeah, I'd like to hear your story, I was like, well, it's like 10 seconds long. I've been talking for a while now. So Yeah, that's the one thing. I'd love to see something like that. It'd be pretty interesting. I'd probably freak out just as bad now that I know that I do that. I've never been scared like this for any other reason. Never ever, like, right to my core, just so scared. Um, when those headlights turned off, it was game over. My brain flushed. I didn't even know what was going on anymore.
Yeah, you were in shock, and I mean, you should be privileged to be able to see one of these creatures because it lets you know there's a lot more out there on this planet than what we know about. And yeah, I thought it was funny you said that the strangest thing that's ever happened to you is your wife wanting to marry you and seeing seeing this creature.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, did you end up going back to that area and camping in that exact spot?
Exact spot. That was kind of one of the first trips back out, as I went right back to that exact spot. And it was like peeling off a scab, you know. Um, I
Yeah.
fought through it. Everything was fine. We did it again, and now I really don't hesitate to head on out. But I tell you what, if I'm awake in the middle of the night out there, you know what I'm thinking about.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You're on high alert. Do you have a dog that you take with you?
Two Great Danes. It's funny you ask that because that's part of me getting back out there is having the dogs.
Yeah, they'll be the guards of the camp and they'll alert you if these things are around. They'll be able to pick up on the activity well before you do, especially like how you said the creature didn't make a sound whenever it moved. The dogs, they'll be able to hear that.
Yeah, that's the hope, and that's part of me. Now we have a RV. It has hard walls, and um, we have the dogs, and we go into areas where there's a lot of people for the most part. We're not out in the deep forest, and that's part of being able to be back out there. And just a lot of the training that I've had with all the years of hunter safety stuff has helped so much, and I can't recommend that enough, to get out there and really learn about the environment, learn about the wildlife, learn about what the laws are for the different things. Um, and just that exposure really helped me.
Yeah, absolutely. When you were 10 years old and Mount St. Helens blew up, could you hear it where you were at?
No, no, it was just a big gray rolling cloud coming through the sky. And I thought it was snowing, and it wasn't snow, and it didn't melt. And all that lush black dirt turned into gray poofy powder, and they were using snow plows to pile it up on the side of the road, and those piles are still there today.
Wow. That's incredible. I mean, the destruction, the magnitude of it. I couldn't imagine what it would be like if Yellowstone blew up.
Oh man, yeah, it would make a mark on everything. Definitely. Yeah, it changed that whole area. Completely changed that whole area. I mean, it's recovered almost completely now, but you dig down 2 inches and you're in the ash everywhere you go.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any questions for me regarding Bigfoot or anything else that you'd like to share?
No, I just want to say thank you for, putting the channel together and getting people like me to share their stories, because, they're white whales for me. And, I can't thank you enough for getting this stuff out of the woodwork so I can hear how it made somebody else feel. When you have an experience like this that's so life-changing, and you think you're just nuts for seeing it and for reacting that way. Everything about it was a horrible negative experience for me, and I'm still healing from it. And it was a peaceful encounter. You know. Um, so can you imagine if it wasn't? Like, that fear was justified. I mean, these things are giant monsters if they want to be, I can imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad to hear that it was a peaceful encounter because things could have easily went south. They could have tried to come into the camper and tore you guys apart, but that's not what happened. And it sounds
No,
like,
that's not what happened.
yeah, it just sounds like they were observing you guys. They were curious, and they kind of let you know that they were in the area.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what that scream was about, but that could be, hey, we're here, just so you know. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Adrien, you did an excellent job at sharing this encounter with me, and I'm glad that you contacted me, and it was very brave of you to openly share that here on Sasquatch Theory. So I'm really glad you came across the channel, and it really means a lot to me.
Yeah, same.
All right, man. If you encounter anything else in the future, or if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. If my number changes, you can use the email. And yeah, I'd definitely like to hear about this area if you experience anything else.
Will do.
All right. You be safe, and I hope the best for you and your family. And it was a pleasure speaking with you today.
All right.
All right. You take care. All right, Adrien, thank you again for sharing your Bigfoot encounter with me, and it certainly was a terrifying one. I keep getting reports of people saying that the eye shine was red, and that is scary to think about. Some people say that it's self-illuminated, and others say that they were glowing red when there was a light source reflecting off of the eyes, but these things are definitely curious, and they will come up to people's camp, and that's scary to think about because we hear that a lot with like grizzly bears, to hide your food and hang it up high, or else grizzly bears will come into your area. So it's the same way with the Sasquatch. If you have food around, they might show up. But then again, you could camp out in the woods your entire life and never have a Bigfoot encounter. So it's just really hard to determine when this will happen, and it always happens whenever you least expect it. That's just how life works. But yeah, I would like to visit the Kaibab National Forest. I have received a lot of reports from the area, and it just seems very unique. I think the mountains in Arizona are really cool because there's like elk up there, and then you could travel down south and be in the desert, and it's a completely different world. But yeah, it sucks that Adrien was the only one that experienced this, and that does put him in a tough situation because he's out there camping with his wife, and her father is there, and he didn't hear it. So I can definitely understand why it was hard for you to even mention that, because you don't want your wife's father to think you're crazy, and at the same time you don't want her to say, okay, I'm done, you've lost your mind. So I completely understand the position that you were put in, and these creatures do cause a lot of grief because we aren't being told about them, and they do exist. But yeah, I appreciate everyone for listening today. If you guys can, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, comment down below, hit the bell notification, whatever you can do to support the channel. There's been people that have donated through the PayPal and through the thanks button on YouTube. Thank you guys so much, and it really means a lot to me. But yeah, that's all we have for today, and until the next one, you guys be safe out there, and watch your back when you're out in the forest.